Our president has had a long history of being a businessman and now has gained a cult following, which has put him in the office. But what secrets lie beneath? Follow me down the rabbit hole about Donald Trump. Hello, friends, and welcome back to The Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we are talking about Donald Trump. Thank you, Dustin, Jennifer, Virginia, Giselle, and Carter for requesting this episode. As I try to say in all my political episodes, this episode has nothing to do with my beliefs. I'm just putting out the information that I find. But also, if you're new here, because I do have a lot of new listeners, welcome. I start all of my episodes with the history behind the conspiracy and the mainstream narrative before presenting the conspiracies. That way, if you don't have any background knowledge on whatever topic it is that I'm covering, it's not a problem. Now you have all the background knowledge to cover up for whatever you might be lacking. And I try to dumb it down as Barney-proof as possible. That way, if there's like a term that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, I try to explain everything. But of course, before I start any podcast, I like to thank our sponsors. So thank you, Wise Wolf Gold, for sponsoring my podcast. Guys, if you want gold and silver delivered straight to your front door for as little as $50 a month, you can subscribe at rabbithole.gold right now. It's super easy, super reasonably priced for gold and silver, precious metals. So go to rabbithole.gold right now. Thank you, Wise Wolf. I really appreciate it. Let's dive in. Donald John Trump was born June 14th, 1946 in New York City. He is the fourth of 5 children of Fred and Mary Ann Trump. Fred was a real estate developer and businessman. Trump grew up in the Jamaica Estates neighborhood of Queens, and he attended a private school through 7th grade. He was a difficult child, so his father enrolled him in New York Military Academy to complete high school. In 1964, at the age of 18, he enrolled in Fordham University. He stayed there for 2 years before transferring to the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. He graduated in 1968 with a Bachelor of Science in Economics and employed at his father's real estate company basically right away. He had shown interest in the company from a young age, so it kind of made sense, but also his older brother decided he wanted to be a pilot, and so the next person in line for the business was Donald Trump. After graduating college, he was diagnosed with bone spurs in his heel, which led to a temporary medical exemption from military service, so he was exempt from the Vietnam draft. He had already avoided the draft 4 times in order to complete his college education, and his dad kind of called in a favor for him to get these bone spurs conveniently, so he didn't have to go yet again. In 1971, his father made him president of the company, and Fred Jr., like I said, was obviously first in line to take over the business, but he wanted to become an airline pilot, which caused him to fall out of favor with his father, but also meant that he didn't want the business, so Donald Trump could jump right in. This is when he started using the Trump Organization as an umbrella brand. It's kind of like a holding company. The Trump Organization would often license the Trump name for consumer products. Over 50 deals were made involving the Trump name, which generated at least $59 million for the company. Roy Cohn was Trump's fixer, also his lawyer and his mentor throughout the 70s and the 80s. So Roy gained fame for prosecuting Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, who were Soviet Union spies. And in 1973, Fred and Donald Trump, along with their company, had charges brought against them for violating the Fair Housing Act of 1968. The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination in the housing market, whether it be selling, renting, or financing houses. Discrimination based on race, religion, national origin, or sex was prohibited. Other things were added later, but at the time, that's what they were being prosecuted for. So the reason this happened is because testers were sent into some of the complexes that the Trumps owned, and the white testers were told about vacancies, while the black testers were not and were steered to apartment complexes with a higher proportion of racial minorities. The complaint also alleged that employees had put codes on housing applicant names to indicate if they were black or if they were white. This way, they would know if they should rent to them or not. Roy Cohn was retained by Trump to defend and countersue the government on this situation. They were seeking damages of $100 million for defamation. The counterclaim was dismissed, and the case settled with a consent decree in 1975 where the Trumps didn't admit guilt, but they promised not to discriminate in the future. However, that did not last long because 4 years later, they were back in court when they were found in contempt of the decree. It was also around this time that he started to show his propensity for litigation. Like, he didn't care about the cost, about the outcome. It literally didn't matter. He was going to sue everybody. Even if he lost, he always acted like he won. In 1977, he married Czech model Ivana. The pair had 3 children together, Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric. Trump gained a lot of attention in 1978 when he launched his family's first Manhattan venture, the renovation of the Commodore Hotel, which was next to Grand Central Terminal. This hotel was a 2,000-room hotel that operated from 1919 to 1976, and it had been closed for 2 years when Trump took on the project. His father helped to arrange for the $400 million city property tax reduction, and Hyatt guaranteed a $70 million bank construction loan. The hotel reopened as the Grand Hyatt Hotel in 1980. That same year, he got the rights to develop Trump Tower. It's a mixed-use skyscraper. It's also the headquarters of Trump Corporation and Trump's Political Action Committee. It also has served as his primary residence until 2019 when he moved officially to Mar-a-Lago. He purchased the football team, the New Jersey Generals, in 1983. After the season ended in 1985, the league it was in, the United States Football League, folded. Trump actually had a lot to do with the league folding. So the United States Football League played in the spring and summer, while the National Football League played in the fall and winter, as we know it now. So Trump wanted to move the USFL season to the fall, but this would directly compete with the NFL. He also wanted to force a merger with the NFL by filing basically like an antitrust lawsuit. It ended up that the USFL just ended up folding as a league. In 1984, Trump opened Harrah's at Trump Plaza, a hotel and casino with help from Holiday Corporation. This venture was not profitable, so he paid Holiday to take sole control of it in 1986. In the middle of that debacle, he bought the unopened Atlantic City Hilton Hotel and renamed it Trump Castle. Both casinos filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in 1992. Also in 1985, Trump acquired the Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach, Florida. In 1987, Trump published his first book, The Art of the Deal. It was a New York Times bestseller and the first of 19 books published under his name. Some he wrote, some with ghostwriters. 1988 was a big year for Trump. So he acquired the Plaza Hotel. The loan for this came from a partnership between like 16 banks. The same year, he bought the Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. This casino was financed by high-risk bonds for $675 million, and it completed for $1.1 billion and opened in 1990. He filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection on this in 1991. But this wasn't the end of his purchasing spree in 1988. He also purchased the Eastern Airlines shuttle, and it was financed with a group of 22 banks, and he renamed this airline Trump Shuttle. While he was at it, he established the Donald J. Trump Foundation because every super rich family needs a foundation. He went on to donate $5.4 million to the foundation from 1988 to 2006, while other people also donated to the foundation. This was also the year his political desires were first brought to light. So the year prior, he registered as a Republican and ran a full-page advertisement expressing his views on foreign policy and the federal budget. He was like, some things aren't right here. Then he reached out to Lee Atwater, a political consultant and strategist for the Republican Party, and asked to be considered as George H.W. Bush's running mate. This request was found to be, quote, strange and unbelievable. In 1989 and 1990, he lent his name to the Tour de Trump. He was trying to create an American version of the Tour de France, but it didn't work. In 1990, after he had an affair with model and actress Marla Maples, he and Ivana got divorced. Trump and Marla went on to get married in 1993, and they had one daughter together, Tiffany. In the early 1990s, he won the right to develop a 70-acre tract in the Lincoln Square neighborhood. In 1994, he sold most of his interest in the project to Asian investors because he was struggling with debt from other ventures and he didn't think he could take that on as well. In 1992, along with 3 of his siblings and cousin, Trump formed All Country Building Supply and Maintenance Corporation. This company is alleged to have been a shell company for paying vendors providing services and supplies for the rental units. They would then bill those services to Trump management with a 20 to 50% markup. The 5 owners would split the profit and use the increase in cost to get state approval to increase the rent of his rent-stabilized units. So it was kind of like a backdoor way to raise the rent and basically double dip. And he needed the extra money because he was in deep debt. About $900 million in personal debt, to be exact. In order to reduce that debt, he sold the Trump Shuttle airline, his mega yacht, the Trump Princess, and other businesses. In 1994, the 5 siblings formed Apartment Management Associates. They took over the management fees that were being collected by Trump management. This served a couple purposes. They could yet again increase rent, but also they could transfer Fred Trump's assets with a lower tax burden. So Fred was still alive at the time, but he was like phasing out of all these things and he died like 5 years later. In 1995, Trump defaulted on over $3 billion in bank loans. The lenders seized the Plaza Hotel along with most of his other properties. However, he did avoid personal bankruptcy. He converted the Mar-a-Lago estate to a private club in 1995, so he charged an initiation fee and annual dues while keeping a portion of the house as a private residence, which, again, he would move to be his primary residence in 2019. He then founded Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts, which assumed ownership of the Trump Plaza. The following year, Trump Hotels and Casinos Resorts purchased the Taj Mahal and Trump Castle. However, both of them went bankrupt in the early 2000s. The same year, 1996, he bought the Miss Universe pageants. So this included Miss USA and Miss Teen USA, and I'm pretty sure he still owns them today. But none of that stopped him because in 1996, he acquired and started the renovations on another skyscraper. This one was 71 stories and mostly vacant at the time of the purchase. It was later rebranded as the Trump Building. He loves to use his name on things. He loves using his name on things. He started building and buying golf courses in 1999, and by 2016, he owned 17 golf courses. In 1999, he registered as a member of the Independence Party, the New York State affiliate of the Reform Party. This same year, he and Marla Maples got divorced. In 2000, he was a candidate for the Reform Party. He ended up withdrawing in February of that same year, and he did not run. The next year, he registered as a Democrat. Trump appeared in different films and television shows between 1985 and 2001. Again, he loves the spotlight, this guy. He also appeared on the Howard Stern show a number of times. In 2005, Trump married Slovenian model Melania. They have one son together. His name is Barron. From 2004 to 2008, he had his own short-form talk radio program called Trumped. He'd probably have a podcast right now if it weren't for his political career because he just loved being in the spotlight. But it worked out because in 2004, he also became a TV star when he became the host of The Apprentice. This show ran until 2015. And honestly, I didn't know it ran that long. I remember when I was a kid, I watched this show, and that was the only impression I had of Trump growing up. I thought that he just was this business guy that ran this TV show. I had no idea all this other history. And for a lot of us millennials, that's kind of like the first impression we had of him. This show actually helped to change Trump's reputation nationwide, and it earned him more than $400 million in revenue. He co-founded Trump University in 2005. This was a company that sold real estate seminars for up to $35,000. However, the use of the word university violated New York state law. They changed the name in 2010 to Trump Entrepreneur Initiative. In 2009, he again registered as a Republican before becoming unaffiliated in 2011, and then a Republican again in 2012. In 2011, he considered challenging President Obama in the 2012 election and even spoke at the Conservative Political Action Conference. But by May, he had decided that he wouldn't run that year. In June 2015, he announced his candidacy for the 2016 election. He campaigned basically as a rich, successful businessman who was not a politician at all. He also claimed that there was media bias against him. He was picked as the Republican nominee in May of 2016 and won the presidency against Hillary Clinton in November of 2016, sparking protests in major cities across the U.S. Before his inauguration, Trump moved his business into a revocable trust instead of a blind trust, which had a lot of big backlash, basically. Because a revocable trust is a trust that can be amended, altered, or revoked by the settlor at any time, while a blind trust is when the beneficiaries have no knowledge of the holdings trust and no right to intervene in their handling. He said he did this to cleanly sever himself from the business interests, but if he could revoke it at any time, then he's always kind of keeping up to date on his business ventures. And this was kind of an issue because he could sign things in and out of law that would affect his business, and he would know that it was affecting his business. On January 20th, 2017, he was inaugurated, and he filed for re-election only a few hours after becoming president in 2016. Basically, instantly, he's like, I'm going to run again. While in office, he signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Acts of 2017. This was significant corporate tax cuts and a partial repeal of the Dodd-Frank Act. Dodd-Frank Act basically ended bailouts. His administration focused on reducing government regulations. He pursued a foreign policy with an American first mindset. He recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and moved the U.S. embassy there. He emphasized immigration control and started building the wall between the U.S. and Mexico, although he did not finish it. And he withdrew from the Paris Agreement on climate change and prioritized energy independence, including increasing U.S. oil output. All the while, facing allegations of Russian interference in the 2016 election, a media that kept attacking him, an administration that faced multiple legal challenges with over 200 legal actions against some of his executive orders, and he faced impeachment not once, but twice. The first impeachment was due to allegations involving his dealings with Ukraine. Now, a whistleblower complained that Trump had pressured Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky to investigate Joe and Hunter Biden. They said that this was an attempt to gain advantage in the 2020 election. The House voted to impeach him, but the Senate acquitted him. So the impeachment did not go through. The second impeachment came after the January 6th attacks. The House charged Trump with incitement of insurrection. Trump left the White House on January 20th, 2020, and was acquitted of charges the following month. After losing to Joe Biden in the 2020 election, Trump alleged the Democratic Party of election fraud. And he actually tried to fight the results, but was rejected by judges in both state and federal courts. During his presidency, he was accused of rape by journalist E. Jean Carroll. She said that this happened in the 1990s and sued him for defamation over his denial. She sued him again in 2022 for battery and again defamation, and he was found liable for sexual abuse and defamation and ordered to pay $5 million in one case and $83.3 million in the other case. After leaving the White House, Trump moved to Mar-a-Lago, which was his permanent residence, or is his permanent residence, and he continued his notion that the 2020 election was rigged and continued to dominate his party. People often refer to him and the movement and ideology behind him as MAGA, and this is in reference to his campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again." During his 4 years away from the White House, he continued to raise money for his next campaign, and in 2021, he registered a new company, Trump Media and Technology Group, or TMTG, which really was giving me like Higher Ground, like the Obama production company vibes. But this company was to provide social networking services to customers instead of like movies and shows and stuff. He has been very outspoken about censorship on social media platforms and even went as far as filing a lawsuit against Facebook, Google, and Twitter for illegal, shameful censorship of the American people in 2021. So in January of 2025, Meta agreed to pay him $25 million to settle a lawsuit filed by Trump about his suspension from Meta. The company, TMTG, did launch Truth Social in 2022. This is a social media site like X or Facebook because he was permanently suspended from Twitter on January 8th of 2021 in the last days of his presidency after the January 6th situation. He had almost 89 million followers and was known for tweeting some super unhinged things. But whether people loved him or hated him, they followed him to see what he was going to tweet. And so many people would then retweet them and comment on it because it was just the craziest things. I mean, he tweeted about 8,000 times during his 2016 campaign and over 25,000 times during his presidency. In 2024, TMTG merged with Digital World Acquisition and became a public company. 2022 saw many legal issues for Trump. In January, the National Archives and Records Administration retrieved 15 boxes of presidential records from Mar-a-Lago in a transfer agreement that he did agree to. The discussion around these boxes of documents was, in his words, collaborative and respectful. However, classified information was found in the 15 boxes and reported to the Justice Department, as it should be. Later, investigators visited Mar-a-Lago to get more information and deliver a subpoena for some documents they believed to be at the estate. On August 5th, the search warrant was approved and it was executed on August 8th. They collected 11 sets of classified documents, including some marked top secret. The same year, New York filed a civil lawsuit against him, accusing him of inflating the Trump Organization's value. This would help with an advantage from lenders and banks to want to loan more money to him. And he was found liable for that and ordered to pay $350 million plus interest. In 2024, Trump was convicted on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. The case stemmed from the evidence that he sent hush money to Stormy Daniels, who was like a adult entertainer, masked as business expenses to cover up his alleged affair with her in 2006 and 2007. He didn't want this affair getting out during his first campaign, so he was like, be quiet. All the while, he was running for president once again. He announced his candidacy in 2022, which wasn't really a surprise to anybody, I don't think. And on July 13th, 2024, while at the campaign rally in Butler Township, Pennsylvania, he was shot in the ear in an assassination attempt. Another assassination attempt happened in September of 2024 at Trump International Golf Course in Florida. He was unharmed in the second attempt. He won the November 2024 election, making him the second president in U.S. history to be elected to non-consecutive terms. With this election, the 2020 election obstruction case and the classified documents case were dismissed without prejudice because the Justice Department's policy against prosecuting sitting presidents. This presidency has already been under scrutiny, and it's only been a few months. He has continued with aggressive immigration policies and has been threatening and implementing tariffs. He did promise to release the JFK, MLK, and Epstein files. We have been given the JFK and MLK files. However, we have not seen the Epstein files yet, and we want to see them. I'm going to speak on behalf of all of us. We want to see them. We want to know who's on those files, which we are going to get into if he is potentially on those files here in just a little while. But there are theories that are both for and against Trump. I don't have an agenda with this episode. Like I said, I'm trying to tell all the theories as I find them. If you want to call me a Trumper, fine. I don't really care. These theories are both pro-Trump and anti-Trump. So if you hear a pro-Trump theory and you're like, oh, of course, she's just trying to push her narrative, just wait, because there are more anti-Trump theories. So firstly is greenmail. I included this in this section just because he hasn't been convicted of this, but in the late 80s, he purchased significant blocks of shares for various public companies. He was heavily suggesting that he intended to take over the company, but then sold back his shares for profit. So this led to the belief that he was greenmailing the companies. Greenmail is the practice of buying enough shares in a company to threaten a hostile takeover so that the company will instead repurchase its shares at a premium. This results in significant profit for the greenmailer. Again, why is this in the conspiracy section? Because it was never confirmed to be greenmail what he was doing. It was just assumed to be greenmail, and they were like, yeah, we think that's probably what he was doing, but we don't have any evidence. But let's move on to the January 6th situation. On January 6, 2021, Congress got together in a joint session to count the Electoral College votes and formalize the victory of Joe Biden. Trump had been spouting the narrative that the election was rigged and he actually won, but all the Trumpers, all these MAGA supporters were like, yeah, of course Trump won. In order to support Trump, thousands of his supporters gathered in Washington, D.C. Trump actually spoke to a crowd at a rally near the White House and was using the term "stop the steal," which was coined by his followers. This is where things get weird because it depends on the source you are reading, and it's really hard to find any sort of unbiased source. Everything is either pro-Trump, super pro-Trump, or super anti-Trump. There's no this is what happened on January 6th, just a general rundown. So I had kind of a hard time going back and forth because I didn't really know a whole lot about what happened on January 6th until I started doing research for this episode. I tried to keep it as unbiased as possible and tried to give both sides of the narrative because it's really hard to understand the if you don't really understand, if there's so much bias involved. And anytime it comes down to Trump, there's so much bias involved. It actually made this episode kind of tricky. So at the rally, Trump said, quote, "Fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore," end quote. Some people say this is Trump telling his people to, the protesters, to fight, go and fight, actually fight right now. Some people say this is Trump just okay, we have to do more work now. We have to come back in 4 years and fight again. Although we know that Trump was spouting the election was stolen. Whether he was saying go break into the Capitol building or not, he didn't say that. He said fight. But not long after he finished his rally over there, the protesters broke through the barrier on the west side of the building. About an hour later, the east side barriers were breached. Protesters were then seen kind of all over the outside of the Capitol building. They were on different levels, on decks almost is what it seems. And they had their flags. They were just protesting the results of the election. On the west side of the building, protesters were seen fighting with some police and then broke into the building. This is where I have more questions. The people that broke into the building were called a mob. And honestly, like I said, I didn't know much about the January 6th attacks until researching it for this episode. What I found were videos of about 30 or 40 people walking through the building, almost as if they were touring the Capitol building, because there's still the rope barriers that are roping off all the statues and all the things that if you were on a tour there, you wouldn't be allowed to go and touch, but you could look at. They were literally walking along the tour trail. And then at one point, one security officer directed this mob away from the Senate chambers. So from that angle, you're okay, well, these guys seem super calm, chill. They seem chill. They're just walking around in the Capitol building. Should they have been there? Should they have gotten in like that? Probably not. But was it a mob? They weren't burning the place to the ground, so no. The Senate had gone on recess, so the senators weren't in the chambers at the time. They were all being directed out of the building. Now, don't get me wrong. They did do some damage to the Capitol. So the House was still in session. The Senate had taken a recess, House was still in session. In an attempt to get into the House chambers, the protesters broke windows, and an Air Force veteran from California was actually shot during that time. And I can imagine how terrifying this would be to be inside the building, not really like being a senator or like being a part of the Congress, not really understanding what's happening with the protesters and this mob that has now come into the Capitol building. You don't really know, right? Like the whole situation's very unknown. And one of the representatives was in her chambers, and she said her and her husband were in there. Her husband was holding the door closed, and she's crying because she's like, we didn't know if the door was going to break open, if they were going to come in and shoot us. So I can understand that mindset as well, because that would be so scary. Now we have at least one person shot in the building, and they're breaking windows. So that's scary. So this is where it kind of goes both ways. You're like, well, was it just like it wasn't peaceful because they broke in, but these people just like walking through on a tour, or were they being violent? Both can be correct. I mean, the rioters literally breached the Capitol in 8 different places. Although the theories surrounding this attack say that the FBI was there and had a hand in instigating the attack. Some people who were in the Capitol building say that they were actually let in by security guards. They didn't breach it. The doors were open. They were allowed to walk right in. And there are videos of a guy with an earpiece pulling people into the building. Ray Epps, a U.S. veteran, was one of the people leading the charge on the Capitol. And Ray was number 16 on the FBI most wanted list for a few days after the January 6th attack, but his name was taken off the list not long after that. So this led many to suspect that he was working for the FBI on this, because there are only 2 ways you get taken off the FBI most wanted list. Either you die or you were an informant. Plus, there was a Freedom of Information Act request put in for all communications between the FBI and Ray Epps between January 1st, 2020 and January 1st, 2021, and the request was denied, stating, quote, while the existence of FBI records is acknowledged, the records are exempt from disclosure as processing these third-party records would constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy, end quote. Which, okay, so they have records, but it would be an invasion of Ray Epps' privacy? But how many people do you know that are in contact with the FBI? Because, like, I only know one person in my whole world of people. I know one person that's in contact with the FBI, and that's because they applied to work there. The FBI doesn't just, like, randomly communicate with civilians. They have an agenda. And then it's really weird because you're randomly communicating with this civilian, and that random civilian, the same guy, decided to breach the Capitol building. I mean, okay, maybe he just got caught up in the moment, but that's a pretty big coincidence. And we don't believe in coincidences. Now, I'm not saying people didn't get hurt and property wasn't damaged. All of that is 100% true. It is easy to incite violence when you have protesters all worked up. Only one little thing has to push them over the edge, and the mob mentality kind of just takes over the whole thing. So, was it all planned? Did the FBI plan for this to happen as a way to make Trump supporters look more unhinged than they actually are, and to make it look like Trump is inciting an insurrection? Because both things happened. Now people believe that the Trump supporters are so unhinged and so crazy that they are going to break into the Capitol building and burn it to the ground, even though that's not what happened. That's what is being said. And people can't seem to get over this January 6th thing. Like, they are just so stuck on it. They're like, well, Trump and January 6th, he did this. Now, maybe he didn't do it, but he might have done a couple other things. Let's talk about the assassination attempts. So I covered the Pennsylvania assassination attempt in detail in my current events episode I did at the time. I will link to that episode in the show notes. If you want to go back and listen to it, you can just click on it and it'll take you right back to that episode. There is a theory that Trump actually planned the assassination that I did not cover. I think that this is really risky. I don't know why anybody would plan their own assassination attempt, but I could see him being dumb enough to do something like that too. If not both assassination attempts, at least the attempt on him at the golf course, because he didn't get shot in that situation. Although it's thought that he was in on the Pennsylvania attempt as well, because of the way that he moved his head right before the shot. He just leaned forward and he kind of cocked his head. Maybe. The idea is that the bullet wasn't actually supposed to hit him, but it did. And this is also why he stood up right after he got shot and started yelling, "Fight, fight, fight," because he knew that he wouldn't be shot again because he was in on it. But why would he do something like that? I mean, he did this to gain more attention and to more radicalize his followers. Not that they really need radicalization. The MAGA following is like a cult. It's very weird, very aggressive. But also, just 14 days after being shot, he was speaking at the Bitcoin conference and his ear was perfectly fine. Like, not a scar, not a scratch, not a bandage, nothing. Maybe he faked the whole thing. This brings us to our next theory. Is Trump just another deep state prop? Because if they wanted him dead, he would be dead. How many people has the deep state successfully killed? Like, they do not miss. When they want you dead, you're gone. And Trump has such a following and is so outspoken about so many things that they wouldn't let him continue on if they weren't okay with what he was saying. They can further divide the country with Trump in office, which is exactly what they want to do. So liberals have proven that they will follow what the government wants to do because, like, we saw this with COVID, right? The government's like, put a mask on, stay 6 feet away, and they were totally fine doing it. While conservatives are proven that they will blindly follow Trump. So this turns into a win-win when it comes to controlling the population, because you only have this small amount of people that aren't blindly following Trump, but also aren't blindly following what they're being told by the government. They're like actually thinking for themselves. And that's so much easier to control than the entire population. And we know that Trump has always been for himself and how much money he can make. That's why he uses his name. That's why he sold out his name, because he was like, yeah, use my name, pay me for it, right? Like, it's not about a red versus blue, a left versus right. It's about the 1% versus the rest. And so far, they're winning. There is more evidence of this as well. So on the cover of The Economist, for their issue called The World in 2017, Planet Trump, which came out at the end of 2016, it showed 8 tarot cards all upright, which matters when it comes to tarot cards because if they're reversed, they have a different meaning, you know. The first card was the Tower card, which featured a church tower being struck by lightning and catching on fire. And on one side of the tower, it looks like they're holding like a Soviet Union flag. And on the other side, they're holding a cross with Jesus on it. The next card in the top row is the Judgment card. It shows the globe with Trump sitting on top of it with a flag underneath him, an American flag, and he's holding a staff and an orb with a cross. The next card is the World card. It depicts 2 famous paintings, an open and closed book, the theater, comedy, and tragedy masks, and what looks like the Parthenon, and another building which kind of looks like St. Peter's Basilica, and a pyramid. The next card is the Hermit. It shows protesters walking through a valley with a cloaked figure on the cliff with a lantern and the world with a crack in it. The first card on the second row is the Death card. It shows a nuclear explosion and the Grim Reaper riding a horse with death and destruction kind of all around. The next card is the Magician. It shows houses on a conveyor belt being 3D printed with a robed man wearing a VR headset, pressing the button to print the homes with one hand and holding up a staff with a light bulb in the other hand. We're going to come back to the Judgment and the Magician card as well. The next card is the Wheel of Fortune. It has 3 people tied to like a Ferris wheel looking contraption with the flags of France, Germany, and the Netherlands flown backwards. And then the last card is the Star card. It has a shooting star in the middle and 14 stars with faces in them, kind of like all around. The whole cover is super eerie, but like I said, we're going to focus on the Judgment and the Magician cards because we're trying to focus on Donald Trump. Donald Trump was on the Judgment card. The Judgment card means awakening, renewal, purpose, reflection, and reckoning. Although, in a tarot deck, the Judgment card is usually depicted as an angel playing a horn in the sky with death on the ground. The Emperor card, however, is the one that has a king sitting on a throne with an orb with a cross and a staff in either hand. The Emperor card means stability, structure, protection, authority, control, practicality, focus, and discipline. The magician card means willpower, desire, being resourceful, skill, concentration, and manifestation. But what's more is that the magician is holding a finger down and a staff up, which is typically how the card is depicted. The right arm is up and the left arm is down. That's important because another deity is often depicted this way as well. We talked about this a little last week, and that's Baphomet, which is like an occult deity. What's more is that MAGA means witch in Latin. In Italian, it means sorceress. In Spanish, it means magician. In Polish, it means magician. In French, it means magic. What are magicians great at? Having you look at one hand while they do something else with their other hand. And how many times has Trump been referred to as the magic? Like the magic of Donald Trump in The Township, Ben Shapiro, April of 2011. Donald Trump, the magic man, March 2018. Trump fires back at Obama, boast he's got magic wand on economy, Fox News, September 2018. Trump's policy, magic wand, boosts manufacturing jobs 399% in the first 26 months over Obama's last 26. Forbes, March 2019. Bangladesh diplomat, Trump is a magic man, but shouldn't build the wall. Politico, April 2019. Trump's magic is evaporating on the campaign trail. CNN, 2019. Has Donald Trump's political magic worn off? CNN, 2020. Well, did you know that MAGA, or Magus, is the fifth and highest degree in the Church of Satan? So we have all these people chanting MAGA, 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 MAGA over and over and over. And we have people that are for Trump that are loving this Make America Great Again, but they just say MAGA. Then you have all these people that hate Trump and they're like, oh, those stupid MAGA believers, like all these, so this word, and I'm doing it right now, is being put out into the universe a lot. It makes you wonder how much power this is giving Satan, or like the devil, if we're going to go that way. I don't mean for all of my episodes to go that way recently, but I feel like that's how every single one of them is going, is that now we're giving power to a higher outside source that is not just like the president of the United States, because of the way that it's being chanted for and against Trump. The amount of times that it's being talked about. And it makes you wonder if this was on purpose, because I feel like they always know exactly what they're doing. They always know exactly what they're doing. So they have all these people. Why else would he choose that slogan that can easily be made into an acronym? Holds a lot of power. Some people also believe that Trump is a Trojan horse for the Vatican. I had kind of a hard time figuring this one out, just because, like, how is Trump involved with the Catholic Church? Maybe he went to a Catholic school. That was the private school that he was going to until 7th grade. I couldn't figure out exactly which private school. He says that he's Christian, although many people don't really believe him. So I looked into his father, and I really couldn't find any religious beliefs that associated with Fred Trump either. Anyways, it's believed that he is the exchequer for the Vatican and world banks. This is the office of state charged with the collection and management of revenue and judicial determination of all revenue causes. This office was held in England and Wales, but it's assumed that that's his position with the Vatican and world banks now as well. We already know that the Vatican is worshiping the devil, so that's kind of how it kind of ties in to him having, like, with the MAGA stuff and the devil, like, all coming together, because if he's working with the Vatican, he's up to no good. But let's move on to the Epstein files. So early in his presidency, he promised he would release the JFK, MLK, and Epstein files. It took a while, but we do finally have the JFK and MLK files. Although I have not finished reading them yet. Really sorry about that. But what we don't have are the Epstein files. Now, I remember hearing early on that Kash Patel, who is now the director of the FBI and is, like, super loyal to Trump, said that if his name was on the files, he would never release this stuff. Now, I don't remember where I heard this. I just remember, like, hearing from different people or different places, like, Kash Patel will never release the Epstein files because of how loyal he is to Trump. So if his name even shows up once, they're sealed. And recently, we have Trump and Elon being teenagers bickering through their breakup online, taking cheap shots at each other, which is great for us because what did Elon reveal? That Trump was on the list, that he visited Epstein Island. Is that true? I don't know. I mean, Elon's now come out and been like, I'm sorry for what I said when I was hurt. My heart was broken. Like, they're being teenagers, they're being children. But if Trump is on that list, we're never going to see it. Like, we already know of a couple names. They've released a couple names where they're like, we don't care about that guy anymore. Like the Clintons. The Clintons are basically untouchable. So yes, Bill Clinton went to Epstein Island. We all know that he's a shitty person. Which is like why I'm not doing a Clinton episode, because I don't know. I worry about being suicided. So I'm not going to do an episode on them yet. Maybe in the future, but not yet. Maybe just a Patreon episode. I don't know. I haven't committed to anything. But nobody's going to touch Bill Clinton because they are so good at taking care of business, let's just say. I have more questions about those Epstein files, though. But there's also rumors that Donald Trump is a time traveler, or the Trump family are time travelers together. So I covered this a bit on the Last President episode. I'll link to that as well, but it's been a while since that episode, and honestly, wasn't my best, so I'll give you a little overview. In 1943, Nikola Tesla died. The government knew some of the things that he had been working on and ordered his things to be seized, and they sent John G. Trump to do the seizing of the blueprints and the different things. So John was an electrical engineer, inventor, and teacher. He worked at MIT, and during World War II, he worked at the National Defense Research Committee. He specialized in radar, but he would understand whatever Tesla was writing down. So our government needed somebody that would understand all the science to read through the notes and papers and look at the artifacts to determine if they had any weapon potential. They didn't want Tesla's nephew to take all the information back to Yugoslavia, which was German occupied at the time, if they could use the information against us. So John Trump, read through everything and determined that nothing was of military value. However, it's believed that Trump found the blueprints for a time machine, among other things, in Tesla's stuff. So John G. Trump is Donald Trump's father, Fred Trump's brother. The theory says that the Trumps have been using the time machine ever since they figured out how to build it to determine the future and make better investments. Although if that was true, I feel like Trump maybe wouldn't have gone into bankruptcy so much. But maybe they hadn't given Trump access to the time machine. Who knows? But then there was a book, and it was like The Adventures of Baron Trump. And the boy, he's a baron named Trump, and he is a time traveler. And it's just strange how similar the book is with the theory that Trump's actually the time traveler and the fact that Donald and Melania Trump named their son Baron. That's all weird. But that's not the only thing, because the same author that wrote those Adventures of Baron Trump also wrote The Last President. And it's about a wealthy man who resides on Fifth Avenue in New York who wins the election and goes on to be the president. So Trump Tower is on Fifth Avenue. He was a wealthy businessman. And one of the people in the new president's cabinet, his name is Pence, which is a little strange because Donald Trump in his first presidency had a vice president named Pence. So all the things were just a little odd. They were kind of lining up a little too coincidentally to not be true. Again, we don't really believe in coincidences around here. So it's just odd. It's odd. And lastly, we have Trump's relationship with Russia. So during the 2016 election, we kept hearing about Russiagate. This was a theory that Trump was colluding with Russia to win the election. They would mess with the voting machines, however, and he would win the election. In 2019, the Mueller report came out concluding that there wasn't sufficient evidence to bring any criminal charges against Trump or his associates. Now, I'm a little jaded about reports like this because I instantly think of the Warren report or the 9/11 Commission report, which I just have a bad taste in my mouth about. But there's no evidence that I could find that say, because like I said, everything's so polarizing when it comes to Trump. So there's nothing that I could find that was well, Trump was colluding with the Russians or Trump wasn't colluding with the Russians. Now they kind of are going back and forth. And again, they are teenage boys, Trump and Putin. well, you should be doing this with your country and you should be doing this with your country kind of situation, which I think is ridiculous. But we're not on the same page. If we were on the same page, I think some of the world affairs would not be happening. I mean, Trump is mad at Russia over the Ukraine war, but it also is weird that the Democrats have kind of just moved on from Russiagate so easily because, like, they haven't moved on from January 6th. I don't know. It's weird how we just, like, stop talking about Russia. Russiagate, we're just done. It's all fine. So, I don't know. I go back and forth with these things. I kind of have a hard time believing because, like, with January 6th, for instance, there's, like, two mainstream narratives. It's not like a mainstream narrative and then, like, another narrative. It's like there's a mainstream narrative that January 6th was actually an insurrection and it was actually an attack and it was actually, like, really, really bad. Then there's a mainstream narrative that it was the FBI that created this issue and it was all just set up to be an insurrection. So it's like, if they're both mainstream, then what's the conspiracy? There's also a lot of conspiracy theories that Trump, like, puts out. He's like, oh, well, what about this thing? And what about that thing? I didn't include all those in this episode because this episode was supposed to be about conspiracies about Donald Trump, not whatever he's putting out as a conspiracy, which maybe I could do that in a whole like mini episode. I don't know. But that's all I have for you guys. So until next week, my friends, stay skeptical and I will see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Valaha, for our awesome intro.